So when I graduated from college, I worked in a bookstore. And the last person hired is the person who's in charge of children's books. And because it's the messiest part of the bookstore. And also science fiction because you had to keep restocking all the series books, all the Terry Pratchett, so you had to make sure you had this. So it was labor intensive, and nobody ever wants those sections unless they're interested in those topics. And I was interested in science fiction, and I was interested in children's books, and that's where I started in book selling. And then I got a job at a children's museum, the Please Touch Museum for Children in Philadelphia. And I became a bookseller and a children's book buyer and a product developer. And I married my Penguin rep, Mr. Von Drasek. Yes, I did. I picked up the Penguin rep. And he got a job opportunity in New York City. And we thought, well, let's take a chance and go to New York City. And we moved to New York City, and at that point, he was at Penguin, Viking Penguin, and I was looking for work, and I did a little freelance for children's museums, but then a job came up at Putnam, so I went to work in publishing, and not only children's book publishing, but for adult and juvenile and gift sales. And that grew into a job at William Morrow. And that's when I started to suspect that I had a focus in children's books, because at William Morrow it was Green Willow Books. It was a great list. And I loved talking to the editors and the marketing people, so it felt like a good match. And then I met a librarian who looked me in the eye, took me by the hand. We were talking about children's books, and I was very excited. Oh, did you see this one? Did you see the new whatever? And she said, my dear, you are wasting your life with a computer and a telephone in an office. You should be with children and books. You should be a librarian. I remember thinking I should be a rock star too, but that's not going to happen. So then she said, why don't we have a cup of coffee and I'll tell you what librarians do. And most of the things that a public librarian do are pretty much the same things a bookseller does. You buy books for the collection. You share the books with the people who come in. You help people find what they're looking for. The fun parts of the job. And I actually really love the part where you don't have to make change at the register. I never liked running the register. I never liked balancing the drawer at the end of the day. So that was really, really great. And then there were other things I didn't actually know anything about, but I thought, wow, you can go to school for that, like learning storytelling and folklore. And I kind of was full of myself. I had managed bookstores, so I thought, well, I could manage a branch library, right? Eventually, I would know how to do that. Actually, it turns out, no, I didn't know how to do that, but that was okay. And so the husband, who traveled a lot, came home, and I said, I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to be a children's librarian. And that's what I did. I became a children's librarian at the Brooklyn Public Library in a branch in Park Slope, Brooklyn, which now is a very hip neighborhood, but wasn't back then. And I was a public librarian for 5 years. Then I went to work at the Bank Street College of Education. And Bank Street was a very unique situation because I was not only a children's librarian for the School for Children pre-K through 8th grade, but I was also teaching children's literature to graduate students. And I was also the director for the Center for Children's Literature. So when we think of Bank Street, we think of the Bank Street writers, we think of Margaret Weiss Brown, we think of Maurice Sendak, we think of the readers, the Bank Street readers, which were the first books for literacy that focus on urban children. So when you think of Dick and Jane, you think of suburbs and little white children. back then, even at Bank Street, these readers in the 60s were diverse. And it was a great job, and I loved that job. It was a fabulous job. My husband's family is from Mankato, Minnesota, which, as you know, is the home of Betsy, Tacy, and Tib. And when we got married, we were in Philadelphia at the time. When we got married, the in-laws all said, well, you know, they always bring the brides home to Minnesota. And I laughed because there was no way I was moving to Minnesota ever. I'm a city person. I didn't even know how to drive. So this job came up in Minnesota, and it is one of the leading jobs a children's librarian could have, to be in charge of the Curling collection, the Hess collection. We have a Paul Bunyan collection. We have a Treasure Island collection, a Wizard of Oz collection. Rare books, manuscripts, original art. Who wouldn't want to be in charge of this? So I applied, and the University of Minnesota is pretty slow at hiring because they want to know that it's a good fit and you're going to want to do this for a very long time. And I applied in January. I was, after a series of interviews and emails and all this other stuff, they offered me the job in August of 2012, right before school started. And I went back to my school and I said, well, here's something interesting. And because Bank Street is the hub of progressive education, they said, this isn't a problem. You know, children understand there's transition in life. We'll just do a transition. So I had 2 people shadowing me for a month. And then for a month I was still there. They did the job. And then I moved to Minnesota. And it's been a great wild ride. It's 5 years now. I feel very confident in my driving skills. I did learn to drive in the polar vortex. But I did get a car with heated seats. And I also, there's interesting things I never knew I needed to know. Like, did you know if you turn on your car and you leave it in your driveway running, it's called an attractive nuisance, and you could get fined? It's true. And does that stop me from doing this? No, it does not. So when it's 17 degrees out, I do. So everybody, you know, come by my house, steal my car, so it'll be on and warming up. So what else do you need to know? 5 years. In those 5 years, I've learned an awful lot. One of the things I've learned is, did you know that Minnesota is pretty much the center of the universe for the creators of children's books? There are over 400 members of the SCBWI. That's the Society of Children's Books, Writers and Illustrators. In this metro area, 400 members. It's a dense population of creators, artists, writers, and publishers. So we also have Learner and Capstone, Creative Education, Abdo. And because of the publishers, the writers, the support of the programs, the Loft, the Hamlin Creative Writing Program, the Creative Writing Program at the U, Metropolitan, we have a density of education, of teachers, that makes this a unique, fabulous place to live if you love children's books. And that's what I learned moving here, is that these are my people. And people often say, what do you miss about New York? I miss my old friends. I miss the people I knew walking down the street, the dogs in the neighborhood. But in terms of people to talk to and share and get excited about books, what could be better than Minnesota?
Will you touch on place is important to me. My son lived in Park Slope for a while, just moved in with his new wife in another area, I think in Bushwick now.
I know Bushwick.
I made a pilgrimage to the Bank Street School to try to see the notes for the writers' workshop that Margaret Wise Brown and Ruth Krauss and people like that were in together under Lucy Sprague Mitchell's direction.
Right.
And they said, well, it's in a box, and if we can get it organized, we'll let somebody see it. But even the biographers haven't found it yet. So I'm sure they found it by this time. But I wanted to write about that once upon a time. So, we have a lot of things, possible things in common. Plus, of course, I've gotten to talk to some of the Minnesota children's writers, and I know what a little bit about what this climate is like. So, well, there's so many directions to go, but as long as we ended with this talk about the collection, could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in terms of new developments in the collection in the last few years? We'll go back to some of the earlier stuff later, but we ended
well,
there,
it is all connected. For example, when I got here, we keep the materials in a cavern that is 2 football fields wide. I think it's 80 feet below ground level. It's a constant 65 degrees. It's got a 50% humidity. It's perfect for paper. It's perfect for books and manuscripts and original art. And we hold more than 100,000 pieces just within my collection. There are 14 other collections in the cavern. And I came here from the point of view of being a teacher, of being an educator, as well as being a librarian. So my library curator job, that hat is let's take care of things. Let's make sure we're holding the things we should be holding according to our scope of service. And let's keep the stuff safe. And then my educator hat is I'm keeping all this stuff safe, but you can't see it unless you come visit me. So it's something that I'm passionate about, is sharing these materials, but not just, we'll never have enough money to just digitize everything. So that's one part of it. And the other is some of this stuff is under copyright. So we can't digitize it and just put it on the internet. So we have parameters here. We do loan to other institutions. So materials from our collection have been displayed at the Brandywine Museum in Pennsylvania, at the Eric Carle Museum in Massachusetts, in museums all around the world. Right now I think we have 8 pieces from Virginia Lee Burton's Little House in Tokyo for a Virginia Lee Burton exhibit. So it's all very exciting. But again, you have to go to those institutions to see the cool stuff. So when I first got here, I thought, how can we present the materials for teachers and librarians in context? So we have been creating digital exhibits. So one of the ones that I'm very excited about that is accessible to grades, 3rd graders, to graduate students. There's a book called Balloons Over Broadway, and it's a biography, a picture book biography of Tony Sarg, who was a puppeteer. And Mr. Macy, who had a Thanksgiving Day parade, but he had live animals, and they were scaring kids, or it just wasn't a great thing to have live animals in this parade for Thanksgiving. And he called up this famous puppeteer, Tony Sarg, and said, "Hey, Tony, can you do something here? Can you make big puppets or something, or animals? Could you do that for me?" And Tony Sarg thought about this, and he was very inventive. He was a marionette maker person. He made puppets. He had Broadway shows. And as he thought of it, he thought, wouldn't it be great if you could have huge puppets, maybe fill them with helium, maybe have them float. Wouldn't that be really great? You could move them around like marionettes. You put strings on them, could move their arms. They'd float between the buildings. Wouldn't that be really cool? And he experimented, and things blew up and stuff happened. But he finally was able to create these huge balloons that floated down Broadway during the Thanksgiving Day parade. And Melissa Sweet, an award-winning artist, was fascinated by his story and thought, how can I make a picture book about this? And Melissa Sweet, who won the Cybert Award for Best Nonfiction Book of the Year from the ALA for this book, Balloons Over Broadway, created this accessible book that's great to read aloud. It's STEM. It's a science, technology, engineering, math book. It's trial and error. So we have this all in this one 32-page packet. I think it might be 38 pages, maybe. I'm not really sure. It's a little longer than your regular, typical picture book. And so we have this book that's a biography and more. But even better, or amazing, or incredible, is that Melissa Sweet gave the University of Minnesota Archives and Special Collections all the materials that went into the making of this book. So when a book is made, there's a manuscript. So to write her manuscript, she had to do research. So we have her research notes. We took her research notes and put them up on the internet. So you can follow her path of how she learned more about Tony Sarg than she already knew. We have her thumbnail sketches. So once you have the research and you start putting the script together, every children's book illustrator, whether you're new or old, creates thumbnail sketches and lays out the pages to see how this is all going to work. And then they create a dummy book. It's just paper, pasted things in, stuff scribbled on it. It's not finished, but it gives an idea of what the page turns will be. Most creators that we have in our collection have 1 or 2 dummy books to show the editor how they see this going. Melissa Sweet has 10. So we have all 10 so we could see her creative process. Well, then what about her paintings, her collage? How did she decide what to do? So we have all that material that went into it. Now, you can't put all that up on the internet. It'd just be too much. So we chose specific topics that would be of interest. So on the cover of Balloons Over Broadway, there's a balloon. And the balloon is of an elephant. And if you go through her papers, you can see the transformation of the elephant from the first sketches to the finished watercolor painting. And for me, that's a gift that we can give from the Curlin collection to any teacher, any librarian. You're a graduate student in an MFA program in creating children's books. What would be better than seeing Melissa Sweet's process in creating this picture book? You're an art student at MCAD. So we start with, who are these exhibits for? And then we look in our collection and see how we can provide the answers using the materials in our collection. So we have Balloons Over Broadway, and you could just Google that, Balloons Over Broadway, UMN. It'll come right up. Another thing that happened when I got here and I started teaching, we'd be bringing boxes up from the cavern. We'd open a box of an artist's work, James Marshall. So here we have James Marshall's book, and it's Red Riding Hood. And you're thinking, well, shouldn't there be original art, a Red Riding Hood illustration? And what there's in there is acetate sheets with blobs of gray and notes and things like that. Ariane Dewey's Duck and Goose, or Duckling and Goose. Acetate sheets, blobs of gray. A little note on the side says cyan. A little note on the side that says magenta, yellow. This is where's the art? And then we have to explain, this is the art. This is pre-separated art. This is how picture books were made. The artist did sketches. They did a few color studies. But the actual art that went to the publisher were these clearish sheets of plasticky stuff, or vellum, blobs of gray tones with numbers next to it, 3%, 10%, and the color that was supposed to be, so that when the printer got these sheets, they printed the red. Then on top, well, first they had the key plate. So the key plate was black. So black, then red, then yellow, then blue. And that was it. That's all they had. And those melded together. 3 or 4 colors melded together to create the colored art. So, did you see how long it took me to explain that? Undergraduates do not have that kind of patience. They want to see the art. They don't want to talk about it. They came to the library. It's so complicated. It's so hard. It actually isn't. But there were no references for me to turn and say, hey, read this, or look at this, or prepare the class by giving them handouts. So I thought, well, how would I do this? Well, take the stuff in the collection and let's see how that works. So that's one of our exhibits called Pre-Separated Art. I brought this. And we hand this, we give this, we send a link to the teachers so that they can see. So this is exactly that. So this is the pre-separated art. This is what the printer got. This is how it came off the press. Isn't that amazing? That was a special skill that the artist had. And so we can explain that by having an exhibit online. And you can go in deeply, or you can just understand it this way. Ariane Dewey did not see this colored art until it came off the printer's press. And they could adjust it from there. That's with the proof sheets. So we do have the proof sheets in the collection. This is what she delivered. And each artist had to do the art 4 times. The key plate and the 3 colors. Now, we have camera separated art. It's all digital. They don't have to do this work. But you see, and we show you on our digital exhibit how that retro look, when you look at certain children's books that might be called retro, they're doing it on Photoshop, but it was done with the color separation in mind. So that's one of our digital exhibits. Ooh, and our most recent digital exhibit, I just love this. So you see this is picture book art. So this picture book art, often teachers, librarians, children, students, art students want to know, how was this book made? How was this art in this book made? So what we did was we made a resource using the art from the collection to say, this is gouache, this is watercolor, this is etching, this is printmaking, and very famous names, familiar famous names. Barry Moser, Leonard Everett Fisher, Maurice Sendak, pen and ink from Maurice Sendak, Ariane Dewey, and our most recent acquisition in our collection was the entire output. Lois Ehlert, who you're familiar, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, I'm sure you're familiar with. She just donated all of the original art from all of her books to the Curling collection. So you can see her exquisite collage, you can see her research that she did in nonfiction. We actually found a dead butterfly, thank God it was dead, I guess, a dead butterfly in her research for Waiting for Wings. It's like, are we keeping that? No, we did not keep the butterfly. So that's the curator's job, is to say, yeah, that is interesting, we're not keeping the little glassine envelope with the butterfly in it. There are plenty other opportunities for people to look at butterflies. So, yeah, it's every day is different. Every day is exciting. Sometimes I work from home if I need to get a lot of writing done for the work that I'm doing. Because if the phone rings, a half a day could go away because somebody's moving. And we need to talk it out. And I'm not going to say, look, I don't have time today to talk. Let's make an appointment. Are you crazy? I'm taking the call. So, so those are our digital exhibits. Maybe you are not aware that in 2019, it is the 70th anniversary of Dr. Curlin's first gift to the university. So if you want to know about Dr. Curlin, I have a blog, and the blog is called The Blue Ox Review. Did you know I had a blog? Yeah, you did. So the Blue Ox Review, posting one article-y thing, one blog posting every day, Monday through Friday. Nothing on the weekends. So I think that's plenty. And just this week, I wrote about Dr. Curlin and his gift to the university. And so 70 years ago, in 1949, that's when his first gift to Stanford, to the university was. And to celebrate, we're going to do an exhibit at the Anderson Library. So that'll be in 2019, 3 floors. Start at the top with the oldest materials, moving all the way down to the most recent gift. And it'll be segmented by subject. And I don't know if you had the opportunity to go to New York when Leonard Marcus did his exhibit, the ABC of it, Why Children's Books Matter. It was a magnificent exhibit. And he talks about the romantic child, or where children get their books, libraries, it's gifts. What is a banned book? What does that mean? You know, how do children get books? They get books by passing them around in the classroom underneath their desks. How do children get books? So that the structure of this exhibit will be Leonard Marcus's words and structure to celebrate Dr. Curlin's gift. That's been keeping us pretty busy because we have a year. We have a year from now to get that all up and going. So, and of course we have classes, and I go out and speak. I just spoke at the Minneapolis Women's Club. Do you know that? So they have a beautiful building. And I talked about what makes award-winning books. Oh, which reminds me, you're invited. Next Wednesday, there'll be a panel of people talking about what it's like to be on book award committees. So we'll be talking about Caldecott, Newberry, the Minnesota Book Awards. I'll probably talk a little bit about Ezra Jack Keats, which is an award for new writer or illustrator with less than 4 books. And we've just started holding at the university the Vanette Ridgway Award for debut picture book, author or illustrator. So someone you're familiar with, John Coy, won for his first picture book, Night Driving. And he said that it really did make a lot of difference to have someone pay attention and say that his first book out of the box was remarkable for its writing. That was a great boost for him. On dark days when things are being rejected, he was a Ridgway winner. I think that covers an awful lot.
Yeah, it's an exciting menu of activity. So what kind of a staff have you got to do this?
We only have one full-time person besides me. Okay. That's Caitlin Marino. She's our assistant curator, and she is remarkable. She is a genius. She is organized. She just is so great at her job, which lets me go out and do the stuff I love to do. Her background is in archiving and curatorial work, so that's of great help. And after that, we have a few part-timers helping with cataloging and processing of materials, but we have volunteers, and we rely on our volunteers who are helping with these digital exhibits, open mail. You know, we get a lot of books because I'm a book reviewer. So a lot of it has to do with just keeping track of what's coming in and how we're keeping it organized. So we couldn't do it without volunteers and interns. And donations. The donations of the Curlin Friends, it's $25 to be a Curlin Friend. You'll say, well, that's not a lot of money, but there's a lot of people who don't have more than that to give us. But there are people who can and will, and I hope do, give us more money, because that's the money we use to create the digital exhibits. That's the money we use for special events. In the spring, we're going to have Kevin Henkes come, and we also have Matt and Jenny Holm, who did Baby Mouse. They're coming for the Curlin Award. I can say that now, it's not a secret. The Curlin Award this year is Matthew and Jenny Holm for their life's work and their donations to the collection. And Kevin Henkes will be coming to do the Chase lecture. So that's how we do things, donations.
It was just amazing too. I mean, the cataloging work for a major donation must be by itself a huge thing.
It's a huge thing, and that's what curators call the backlog. And I just cannot have something come in and not have it available as soon as possible. So a lot of that is me begging people for money so I can pay someone for a short term to just come in and take care of it. So, or the generosity of the Friends of the Library. My supervisor is the director of archives and special collections. This is the perfect example, so I'm so glad you asked this. So we have a donation of comics coming in. That'll be the Nicholson collection. It dovetails perfectly with the Borger collection. So the Borger collection is mostly 60s, 70s, 80s. And the Nicholson collection is everything before that. So platinum, golden era, great stuff. Not Action Comic #1. Don't hold your breath. I'm not sure we'll ever have that. But that's okay, because this will be a magnificent collection that researchers can come and students can come and see the breadth of the history of comic books and comic book making and comics and strips and things like that. Way back to the Yellow Kid. So we're very excited about that. Less exciting was that the phone call just came that it's coming right now. And not only is it coming right now, it needs to be inventoried immediately before January 1st so that the donor can take a tax deduction. It needs to be inventoried and appraised. What's today's date?
Yes, December 8th.
It's December 8th. Ask me how many students are still hanging around campus that I could even pay cash money. None. So Caitlin, who is very organized and very practical, just said no. I said, there's no. I am so sorry. I'm taking this donation. There is no try we can, or whatever that is in Star Wars. No, we shall do. So I said, quick, check Chris's schedule. She said, Chris has 15 minutes before her next meeting, and then she's booked for the next 3 days. I said, I'm running upstairs. I didn't actually run. I took the elevator. Off at the 3rd floor, boss's door is open, poked my head in and said, okay, first I'll tell you what my problem is, and I'll tell you all my solutions, and you tell me which one. And I told her my problem, and every solution I had, you can't steal that. No, you can't do that. And she said, but go talk to Callahan, Lisa Callahan, who is the processing director, and see if she has any staff that can just be pulled off of other things. And I went to say, and that's teamwork, because Lisa Callahan didn't even blink. She said, great, I can do this, we can do it in the next 2 weeks. I have this person, this person. I said, I have 2 volunteers and a part-time person who can help. She said, by the time we train them to do this, just let me see what I can do with my people. And if we need help, we'll call you. So, wow. My collection gets this amazing, amazing donation. The donor gets his paperwork done in the time he needs it done. How much, you can't even describe what that means in terms of support for the work I do. That other people, even though it's not their official job to do this stuff for me, are bending over backwards to make this happen because it's for the good of the university, the good of the collections, the good of everything. It makes me personally happy, but it really is about we're all rowing in the same direction. And of course, if somebody else needed something from me, I'd raise my hand and say, what can I do? How can I do that? So I have been very fortunate in my jobs. Working at the Brooklyn Public Library was an amazing experience that you couldn't pay enough money to have that kind of training and experience. And at Bank Street, I could take any course I wanted. So I took art in the classroom. I took child development. I had a complete master's in education from the Bank Street College of Education just because I wanted to be in those classes. Emergent literacy. Oh, everyone should take that class. And then here at the university, you could be at the U for something every single night. Every single night there is something incredible happening. But sometimes you have to, go home and sleep and pet the dog and say hi to the husband, right? That's the great thing about computers. You can do your work anywhere. That was off topic.
You're making a pretty good case for your having the best job in the world.
Yeah.
And I can tell you something that might actually make you happier if that's possible, and that is one of the guys I work with, teach with once a year, has made himself a kind of niche in comics. He's just kind of across the way from you in Heller Hall. And this will give me another reason to encourage him to come on over and see what you got.
Hey, but maybe he wants to do a little volunteer work over the holiday break.
It's possible. It's possible. He gets to read the comics, he will, but I don't imagine that once he opens the first page of these things,
we would be going anywhere with it.
You're going to get it evaluated very fast because he'll read it.
That's true. No, we don't want him.
You don't want scholars.
He'll slow down the work. We want to move the work on.
But there will be, I can tell you one guy from whom there will be publications eventually.
Well, he'll be excited.
So this is all quite wonderful stuff, and the idea that you're doing it with a really small staff and cooperation, and doing so many things. What's really impressive to me is the combination of public outreach at a pretty serious level, and this curatorial archival stuff. They're different kinds of skills, different kinds of enterprises, and to be able to keep them together in one shop is really an impressive accomplishment.
Well, thank you, but you do know that's what all the curators do. The hardest thing about working in the Anderson Library is not getting distracted by other people's work. So when I walk by room 120 and somebody's teaching and they're showing a slide and I peek my head in, I'm going, do not walk in that room. You have a job to do. It's very interesting what Cecily's doing or what Tim is talking about, Sherlock Holmes or rare Bibles or whatever they're talking about. Focus, pay attention. That's like the cavern. I do not spend a lot of time in the cavern because I would be not doing the daily work. I would be sucked into the vortex of research, and you take a deep breath and say, okay, focus.
Well, that's one of the things I was wondering about. I mean, you must have developed research interests at Bank Street.
Well, I have a few.
How does it work with those?
That's what evenings and midnight is for. Evenings and weekends. And the thing about research is, I'll see if I have this on my pad, is that it's a rabbit hole. It can suck up all your time. So Thursday mornings on my schedule, I try to have at least 2 hours once a week where I'm uninterrupted to do some research or write. And yes, it's great to have that whole team, because with that team, what we have is people who help. So I don't have to go down to the cavern and get the 14 boxes. I can say, hey, here are the call slips. This is what I need. So we had a researcher come in, Ms. Chappell. She came in, she was just in for one day from North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina. She wanted to see her Aunt Dolly's papers. And Aunt Dolly was Margaret Ann Hubbard. And I had never heard of Margaret Ann Hubbard. Have you?
No.
Margaret Ann Hubbard was a graduate of the University of Minnesota. Her father died when she was youngish. I think she was a teenager. She supported her mother through writing. Her mother came down, and when she went to school at the U, they rented an apartment together. And so this is I don't know if you could see that with the lights. So this is just a blog posting, but the research I was doing is I just got so interested in her, in Margaret Ann Hubbard, who supported herself and her mother during the Depression, writing play adaptations like of Pinocchio, and these were performed all over the United States. And she eventually became a children's book writer. And so you see that's the one thing of Pinocchio from a performance in Duluth. And then her first children's book was called Little Whirlwind. She also wrote adult mystery novels and was at the forefront of what we now think of, I don't know if you think of it this way, but of Catholic mysteries. Father Brown, these with the nuns and priests being the investigators of these mysteries. She wrote a book called Death Takes a Veil, and that book she adapted into a play, and that play is still being performed today, and residuals are going to her heirs. It's crazy, and I knew nothing about her. And so we have 14 boxes of materials in our collection about her papers, her scrapbooks, her family photo albums, her manuscripts, her research notes. So yeah, you can go down that rabbit hole and not come up for days. But again, I do have a job and a job description, so that keeps me focused. So I do have research interests. One is literacy, of course. But first things first, I'd like to get more about our collection out there in the world. I would like to have the history of children's books with examples from our collection out there in the world. So these are our next big projects. So by 2019, and then I can go back to my own work and research and things like that.
Yeah.
As a professional person in the university, we're not faculty, the librarians, but we do have the same continuous appointment, tenure track things. And I'm happy to say that I was appointed continuous appointment last spring. So the pressure to continuously publish. I mean, I want to publish because I want people to know about what we're doing. So I have a piece coming out in the spring in children and libraries about writing in libraries, encouraging children to write in libraries. So I don't stop that, but yeah, weekends and evenings, that's where that goes.
I remember once I was at the Gustavus Library, wandering around in a sort of weird mood, looking for something I didn't know anything about. Stumbled onto a book called When the Kissing Had to Stop, which was about, which turned out to be a piece of a big genre of stuff, of not particularly good writing, with a certain tone, of which the most famous maybe was Cold Comfort Farm, which actually got made into a movie.
Yeah, I know that.
But there were a whole lot of other things that were kind of also rads. And you can imagine, you know, how likely it is that a book with the title When the Kissing Had to Stop would be to, you know, to make it into the pantheon. I mean, it was very much, but it raised a question, and I mean, for a moment, I didn't follow up because I had a lot of other things going on, but for a moment I was actually thinking it would be fun to see what this whole mass of stuff was, and how it related to ordinary language philosophy, which was kind of emerging about the same time and had something of the same tone. I mean, I had all these, but the question occurs to me. You run into the distinction between, or the difference between bringing something to the surface that will otherwise be lost. It's going to disappear just because it wasn't actually all that good, you know, but it's interesting. And doing another work on stuff that's well established and important and isn't going to disappear and everybody agrees it's first rate. Do you feel that tension at all?
I'm more of a believer in serendipity.
Yeah.
So Margaret Ann Dolly Hubbard, if you were doing a comparison of her work, you know, I did some rereading. It's good enough. It was of its time, so it was most exceptional of its time. She was reviewed in the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. What I found most interesting about her life is that she supported herself and her mother during the Depression. They would spend the summers renting apartments around the Twin Cities. They would travel. I spoke with her niece, and she was saying how they drove everywhere. They drove to California from Minnesota, and her mother wouldn't let her go exceed 30 miles an hour. So here you have someone who's a good daughter doing what her mother says, but also has this adventurous life during a period of time that you don't really think of women being able to do these things. She married late in life. I think she was in her late 40s. A happy marriage, ended up in Duluth. So knowing just about this person's life, I think it's interesting, and I think other people would find it interesting. So I don't think it's a matter of, I need to write another biography of Maurice Sendak. Am I going to discover something new about Maurice Sendak? Somebody else can do that. I do believe in the serendipity. So that's where my research bent is original materials that are in our collection. What do they tell us about children's literature? What do they tell us about literacy? What do they tell us about American history, about sociology? I think children's literature informs every topic, every subject. We just pulled out a book called Your Friend the Atom. You know, it just, every day is a surprise. So I think that's, you find, for me, that's where my mind goes, rather than, I guess, I'm interested in what other people are doing. I just don't need to do it.
So how is it with how does it work for you with the blog? I mean, that's daily. How do you manage to do that?
It's daily and not. For instance, okay, let's see if it'll come up here. Let's see if I have the internet here. So, to get the blog, you just go to your search engine and put in Blue Ox Review. And I would put UMN because it's new, and so the search engines are just thinking about it. And there it is. Why the Blue Ox Review? First thing up. Yay! So we know things are going well. So there it is. I'm going to be reviewing books. I do that anyway. I'm reading anyway. I want to share what I'm excited about. So that's one reason why I'm doing this. I can't keep this to myself. The other is I feel it is my professional obligation, and I was told this when I became a librarian, that your professional obligation is to share collection development, review books, let people know why and what is good. So I'm giving a heads up. So each one of these takes an hour or so. And again, that's what evenings and weekends are for. But if you don't know about this series of bilingual board books, Spanish and English, using folk art crafts from Mexico as illustrations, I think you should. I mean, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what I do is give the heads up. I'm giving the heads up on what I think is cool and great and people should be looking at. The other is the archives. Oh, here's Margaret Ann Hubbard. So the blog is literally a week old. And I found an article about her pistol packin' mama. So during World War II, she left the Twin Cities and became a security person for airlines, for Northwest Airlines in Duluth. And so there's a picture in here. Let's see if I can find that. There we go. There she is, the pistol packing mama. So it's also having a platform to let people know what cool stuff we have in the archives. And then also, there's frequently asked questions like, who is Dr. Curlin? Like, don't you think that's something people would be interested in? So, and also, those frequently asked questions, what are the board books you like to give? What do you like to give a new parent? What books should I be giving a new parent? Every bookseller, every librarian, every children's librarian, that's a question. So I put together a list of board books that every new parent or caregiver should know about. Maybe you're the grandma who has the kids one night a week while parents have date night. There you go. Have these in your house. So, yeah. So I don't find it more work. I find it delightful that I have a platform to do this and that the university's letting me.
So you're writing what to like 500 words or so?
Oh yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little blurb about the books or a little something about the topic or links to other people's work. So it doesn't have to be me. Like, I didn't feel like I had to write a lot about those bilingual board books because a critic named Beverly Slavin, she wrote about them. So I just linked to her critical review and say, hey, she wrote fabulous things. I quoted her a little and just linked to her. So a lot of it is pointing to another resource. One of the first ones I did was on, there's a new book. Who's the guy who wrote Wicked? I am blanking on his name. Could look it up. See how that works? Let's go to there. Anyway, he wrote a book that's a prequel to the Nutcracker, and there was a interview with him on NPR. So I just linked to that. So it's just pointing people to further resources. Like, one of the questions we get a lot of is, why don't we make people wear white gloves anymore when they're touching things in the archives? Well, wouldn't that make a good blog post? Put a little research in there, say, and this is why you don't have to wear white gloves anymore.
It's a great service. I'm impressed, inspired actually, because somebody just offered me a shot at a blog on a website, and so I'm inspired that you're able to do.
Yeah, and when I hit 499 words, I say, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
Go do something else.
Right. Now, along the way in our conversation, there was a topic raised we haven't touched yet, which was your interest in science fiction, which got you was part of why you got into some of this stuff. Is that still there?
Oh
You still
yeah.
interested
Oh
in that
yeah.
stuff?
Oh my God. Did you read Laura Ruby's York? It's an alternative New York City, York. So there was no New York, it just was York.
Oh.
It's just fabulous. So I'd say in 2017, that's one of my favorite books for upper middle grade. Speculative fiction, just fabulous, very steampunkish, a lot of fun, very interesting. So yeah, no, Octavia Butler, I just adore. I just reread Parable of the Sower. It's just, Connie Willis. I would say my not work reading probably is all science fiction.
Is there, how close does the university come to duplicating the kind of resource for science fiction that it has for children's literature? Is it anywhere near?
Well, I'm trying to think of a collection whose scope that would be. My scope is science fiction for children and young adults. So if Cory Doctorow wanted to give me his papers, it's in my scope. If Neil Gaiman wanted to give me his papers, it's in my scope. I'd be happy to hold it.